So everyone, with the recording started, I'll just say welcome again. We're about to get underway as we have our three presenters. If you put your screens on speaker view, for those that have just joined us, you will be able to see your three presenters pinned in the speaker view. Nick, Scott and Mark will be your presenters tonight. Nick, if you'd just like to do that little bit of housekeeping again for those that have just come in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us all. Under normal circumstances, we would have loved to have done this face-to-face, but unfortunately, the world we live in, we're going to do it a little differently. So how we're going to run tonight is the two directors, one being Scott Maunder, who's Recreation and Culture Director, and Mark Hodges, who's Director of Development Services. They'll give short presentations around what their roles in this project are and what their functions are. Scott is managing the project from the construction perspective, and Mark is the Director of Development, so will be the assessment authority in this as part of this. So everyone will be on mute except myself and the two directors. As we go ahead, they'll do their short presentations, and then you can use the chat function to ask questions, and then I'll put those questions to the two directors. So we hope to get through this in about an hour. We have sort of 30 odd people in the meeting now, so we'll try to get through in an hour, see how we go. So we might start with you, Mark, if you're ready to go.
Okay. Apologies. I've got a PowerPoint presentation, but I can't get it across on the iPad from the computer, and the computer doesn't work all of a sudden. But so I might just verbally do it, and we can potentially get this up in a tick. But let's talk about what application is before council right at this point in time. So it's an application for the overall concept approval, or a concept design for the Bloomfield Sporting Precinct. What it means when it says, from a planning point of view, a concept approval, it means what used to be called, probably more in general terms, a stage development. So in the total span of what a development might look like, it's appropriate to do it this way, is now to give people an overview of what the end product will look like in concept. So that's firstly the part of the application before council. The more detailed part, because that'll then break it up into three stages. Stage one is also what they're seeking approval for, the applicant, is bulk earthworks, tree clearing, building demolition, minor buildings around the site, and also some remediation of some soil that's in one of the tee-offs. So that's the technical or the detailed application that is being sought in this application, as well as the overall general concept. Stage 2 and 3 is the next part of the development process, would be the subject of separate applications, and so they will come into the future once those details are determined. So the proponent still has to go away and design those matters, and then bring them back with another application for detailed assessment. Same process as this: advertising, community engagement, and referral off to government agencies. Key dates for you to be aware of. So currently the application is on exhibition. So public comment is being sought. It's on exhibition until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of October. So that's key. Where can you go to have a look at the documents? On council's website, so orange.nsw.gov.au. Look under the section of the heading of planning news, and it'll have a list of all the documents that have been submitted with this application. It includes things like the architectural plans, the statement of environmental effects, all the civil designs to go with that stage 1 earthworks, the tree studies, landscape master plan which has been developed, even the traffic studies and noise assessments. So that does give the details of how the whole precinct will effectively work, whilst giving the very fine detail of the civil matters to be undertaken as part of this approval. So that's where you can go to find the information. Have a look at all those documents. It's quite extensive. Now let's talk post-exhibition process. So following the 13th of October, once the application comes off exhibition, Staff then take any submissions that have been received and they forward them off to the, because this application remains as an integrated development application, same as the previous one. It'll go off to the, in this case, the New South Wales Heritage Office. Any submissions, that is, they review the submissions and report back to Council's assessment staff any terms of their approval process. So they might put conditions on the consent, in effect. Following that, our staff will complete their assessment of the proposal, and it will then report provide that report straight to the Western Region Planning Panel. So that's the determining authority is not council itself, as it does with its normal local development. This is the next step up. So council's role is quite limited here. It goes straight up to the Western Region Planning Panel. That when that might happen, it depends on how the submissions go, how the government agencies go reviewing the submissions received, and when we get the general terms of consent. And then again, once the staff have completed their own assessment. Council itself may choose as a proponent to put a letter of support or whatever with that process, but that's a minor part of it. The main part is we do the assessment report and it goes straight to the planning panel. Okay, so that is about it. I might, whilst I'll hand back to Nick, and then I'll keep trying to have a look at my data here. If not, we'll put this same detail up on the website, I'd imagine.
Thanks, Mark. We might go to Scott now, if you're all right to go, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'll do that. Mark, just a question, mate. That the planning panel, when they do their assessment, they have the option, I suppose, of having a public hearing in Orange if they so choose.
Yeah, they certainly do. They'll be doing a site visit. I met with them last week just to run through the process where they want to go. They're pretty keen to come up and actually get a good feel of the site, so they'll do that soon. And with their meetings, they are normally public meetings. They can determine not to, but in this case, I'm of the understanding that would be. So the process would be where during that meeting, the Joint Regional Planning Panel meeting or Western Region Planning Panel meeting, they may invite people to give presentations or allow people to give presentations as well.
Okay, thank you. So I suppose what I wanted to do was really talk to what we've been working on really since the last time this application was public. And that's really, we've worked with a company to develop the landscape master plan. And in so doing that, we've also developed, worked with Heritage rather, to come up with that master plan. So the process we went through with Taylor Brammer was to develop an initial landscape master plan, building on what we'd already proposed. And then we had a meeting with Heritage Council staff. That was quite an extensive meeting, went for a good period of time. They gave us some feedback. We then incorporated that feedback into this revised plan. And then we presented that to what's called the Approvals Committee, which is the body of Heritage that assesses applications to get their feedback. So they were also, it wasn't the full committee, it was a subcommittee of that group. And again, they were happy with where we'd gotten to the landscape master plan. I suppose this was the piece that brought all the different elements together and gave Heritage and the Approvals Committee and now the public a level of understanding and feel for how the project will look in its final state. We're not yet, this plan, whilst we think it's around 90%, we still need to have some consultation with the community and also the local Aboriginal Land Council, and we'll do that over the coming weeks. And then we'll finalise the plan, and then that will go up as a finalised document. But this gives everyone an understanding for where we're at and what we think we'll end up with. So in developing the plan, which is public now, we ran through all the history about where it's located. We've also acknowledged, of course, the Aboriginal heritage and the European heritage of the site, so that's included in the plan. We've looked at how it connects with the city and all the different access points. It's worth noting that the extended development of the Southern Feeder Road, which you can see on that diagram there on the right, which has the dotted lines and the number 5 next to it. So that provides additional connectivity to the site and also south of the site. That road isn't considered in the traffic management study. So that will increase the access points and egress points to the site. So you can see there's going to be multiple north-south connections and east-west connections to the site. So as I said, whilst we know that will happen, because doesn't exist at the moment, it's not included in the traffic plan. We've also dealt with some visual connections of the site. And what we did also was to include some topography. So really anyone that's been out there knows how that site changes from its high point near the entrance down to the lower point where the existing fields are. And why that's important is whilst it's a gradual slope from south to north, why that is important is because when we're developing our civil design, we need to do what's called cut and fill. So we cut from the high point and we fill at the low point to get a level playing surface. Obviously, the impact of that is the ground changes as you do that cut and fill, and we balance that across the site, but it makes it pretty hard to retain vegetation that sits within that cut and fill. So that within the plan, there's an indication of the change in the topography where you can see cut and fill. So particularly down these areas here, you can see with the cut, these trees are above the ground, so they'd be in midair. If you were to leave them in place, obviously you can't. And similarly, on the fill side, they go far above the base of the existing trees. So that just gives you an indication of how we have to manage it across the site, which limits what we can do. A, B and C, A, B and C. So top to bottom is how you read that plan, A, B and C across the page. And then we've provided some extra indications, so how it sits within the precinct. So you can see there's quite a bit of cut this end, and then we level out down here. So that's in this zone across there. We dealt with how we deal with water surface management, so the blue lines are surface water, the red lines are pit and pipe, and so how we drain and how we'll recycle. So we'll recycle using the existing water up here. The overflow from the hospital down south and through these ponds will be underground, and then so that will get picked up in that network. So there's quite a bit of detail in the civil designs to deal with that. So just an indication of how that will work on the site. The layout hasn't changed, so we still have the main stadium in of itself on the western side and the athletics on the eastern side with the multi-purpose fields in the middle. What has changed a little bit is how we deal with the ingress and egress as that design's developed. And so a two-way in and out and then back to town or heading south. But it also affords us an opportunity to do something in front of the existing, in the front of the proposed stadium rather. So all that detail is obviously included. That's just, this slide is intended to pick up some significant trees and history points, the Nublar pit, some of the older trees, obviously the entrance way. So we've included that as well. This is the existing trees and what we're proposing to remove now. So the trees in the lighter green are the ones we'll keep. These ones down the middle will be transplanted. These ones will be protected. These ones will be moved within the next week or so. The trees within the footprints of the two stadiums are the ones that we've already taken out. And then we're including now the trees along Forest Road and some of the trees along Huntley Road. And that's fundamentally because they're pine trees and they're not terrific specimens, and they will also need a replacement strategy in the near future. So whether they stay there or not now, at some point they would need to be replaced. So part of the replacement strategy is to build on some of the both the natural trees that existed in this zone beforehand, but also to bring in some exotic trees. So that brings the colour into the precinct when those trees lose their leaves, obviously, in the winter months. The purpose of this diagram is to show the trees that are being protected and the treatment for those trees. And so they've all been identified and numbered. This is a summary of the process around managing those trees and how we will protect them. There's a 20-odd page document that details that, but this is the summary document. So you can see predominantly they're around the borders, and the reason for that is, as I said, with the change in the slope, there's very little opportunity to keep the trees along the side, through the proposed development area, and obviously along the northern boundary. This one shows you what we'll end up with. So the intent with this was to create a park-like atmosphere around the playing fields that could be used by the community when it's not in active use as a sporting precinct. These trees, the red ones are the exotic trees, and the native trees are basically the balance. So you can see those have been introduced into the car parks. They're not in a linear fashion, they're in clumps. Along here, you can also see some clumping of trees brought in here. So you'll have, whilst there's a lot of trees, there'll also be a lot of open space. The two stadiums will be fenced, but the rest of the precinct will be open and available. It includes walking trails, meeting points, picks up the orange sign as heritage, and there's some nodes here. So you can see these dark green dots are all our marker indicators. So there'll be lots of navigation around the site. Pretty sure the next one shows you. So that's just how we plan on planting and staging. So what we can do when we have to procure trees. Our biggest limiter will be the availability of trees and growing that stock on. This is a plan designed to ensure that we can acquire the required trees when we need to, and then we can plant them as we work through the development. This one's important from showing you the pedestrian lengths, not only on the proposed site, but also through to the existing site, how they will work. They've all been designed around accessible traversing of the site. So whilst these paths are on tops of batters or run along the bottoms of batters or around, they all meet the requirements for accessibility. And then this is a pathway, obviously, that links through to existing. And you can see here where we'll pick up different access points. So if you were to use this site other than attending a sporting event, you could park in any of these car parks, pick up these trails, go for a walk around the precinct, incorporate it in a loop, do whatever you do, and also access the southern 9 holes of the golf course. This just gives we start to get into the detail about how it looks. So we start to get to some more imagery around that. Again, all these different points on the diagram are all picked up in here and what they are and what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve that. So that's fairly a straightforward process. So if you see a number 7, it links to number 7 over here, obviously. So people can work their way through that. We get into some zoom shots. So this obviously is the main stadium. This is the treatment that we're proposing along Forest Road. Again, these are exotic trees, a double laneway in and out, a nice access point parking zone area here for the buses, etc. This yellow part here is a concourse out in front of the stadium itself, and then obviously access to the stadium. Similarly, there's some sections, same as we did before. So the top one is across the field, so that's how it would look from Forest Road across. So you can see it's quite low profile if that's on street level. What you see, you've got the 2 rows of deciduous trees, and then you pick up the grandstand. And so it's quite well sheltered. And then again, this is from a cross section from that car there is on that existing access road through the Heritage Gate. So again, there's a fair bit of granary trees, etc., sympathetic treatment to shelter the visual impact of the development. Planting of trees within the car parks, and also using a product that allows us to green the car park itself, so it's not a black bitumen, is something that we've also included in this document. This one again is the athletics precinct. Obviously, see the car parking, see some of that detail I was talking about of the graining of the parking bays. Those are accessible car parks along there. You've got pathways, meeting points. There's informal play areas considered in there. Those dots are humans to scale, so you can get a feel for what the scale is, and then obviously connects through to the rest of the precinct, and also to Bloomfield itself, to Brabham itself rather. Again, some cross sections, so you can see how it'll look. So this one here is across the northern end of the proposal. So a natural waterway, that's a meeting point. So if you're looking from here left to right, that's how it looks. So it's the trees are quite high once they grow, obviously, and then you've got the understory and places that people can recreate outside of the sporting precinct itself. Details on planning strategy, principles, etc., proposed plans, how they all work. A lot of these were picked up from studies that we'd done within the precinct. Certainly some of them even go back to when we looked at Gosling Creek and replanting that precinct, when that work was done to remove predominantly the pine plantation down there and replace those trees down there to create that environment. Now, the different sources and reference points are in there. They're published documents, but if anyone wants those, we can provide them. Again, it shows what we're proposing. So that's the main element that we have been working on since the last proposal. We haven't developed the grandstand anymore, other than to have some further meetings with state bodies and federal bodies, sporting groups, and the same with the athletics precinct. So we're just refining the inputs into those design elements. That's all I wanted to say at this point.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We might now, as I mentioned earlier, if you go to the chat function, you can start posting questions, and then I'll put them to the directors. We've got one already from Melanie McDonald's. Question for Scott. The tree canopy sizes on the drawings, how far down the road is this? Presumably the new plantings are not that large.
Yeah, that's right. So they'll be the mature trees. You won't have that at the start point, but we'll look to be buying advanced stock. As I said before, one of the limiters is actually the availability of that stock. So we're looking to acquire that and grow that on now so that we can put in as mature stock as we can. But they'll take some time to reach full maturity, of course.
Subsequent question from Melanie saying, so 20 years?
We can provide the growth profile of those trees if it's required, and how fast they grow and how many centimetres they grow a year, but I wouldn't imagine it'd be 20 years.
And I guess there'll be some variations too, because there'll be different species used, but yeah, we'll see what we can find on that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Lee's put up the attachments so you know where to find the DA, where it's on exhibition in the chats as well, so you should be able to see that.
Nick, I might just clarify, just because I was flustered of being on the normal computer, but I'm there now, but when I spoke, so that this stage is the overall concept, as you saw with all those plans, plus civil work, so to do the levelling for those, the groundworks for those play areas. The next two stages are the ones I didn't really talk about, which was the easternmost end of it, which is the athletics oval stadium, and the car park is the following stage. So it's stage 2, and then stage 3 is the western main stadium. So those two are still a bit of a way down the track, but it's the civil works and the concept plan at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Question from David Mallard. Can you explain the reasons for the significant increase in the number of trees to be removed from the earlier concept plans? And given that increase, on what basis do you consider the landscape master plan to comply with the Heritage Council Approvals Committee condition that it should retain as many existing mature trees as possible?
So that plan was developed in conjunction with Heritage. So they've been involved in how it's been developed, what its content is, and what our approach is. So initially, Heritage asked us to retain the pine trees along Forest Road and Huntley Road and in the northwest corner. So the original DA focused on leaving those trees in situ. An assessment done by the landscape architect as to the conditions of those trees and how long they were likely to live for indicated that we could achieve a much greater outcome by what is proposed in the landscape plan. So the elements around retaining the significant trees are really the ones along the southern boundary and the ones that are highlighted through the precinct, that sheet that documents those and how they'll be retained. Certainly the ones across the playing fields are unable to be retained because of that change in slope I talked to. But, you know, at some point those pine trees will die. We all know that it won't be in 50 years' time. It will most likely be within 5 years' time, and they will need replacing. So those trees aren't staying there. At some point they'll perish. They're in poor condition. They are in bad health. So, you know, we either replace them now, and then we have a precinct that incorporates that replacement and grow them on with the rest of the site and create a lovely feel to the site that will last for decades, or we do it in 5 years' time and have a missing tooth approach. So they're the reasons really around why there's a change in the tree count. I'd really encourage people to concentrate on what we'll achieve and what the outcome will be from my perspective, rather than necessarily some shifting around.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We have a question from Leslie Smith. Why has work commenced when still in the planning process?
Quite simply, there was an approval obtained for the works that were conducted on site.
We've got a question around, can we post this recording on the Your Say site? I think we can. We'll have a look at that. From Stephen Nugent, Councillor Nugent, will there be a net increase or decrease in trees when all the new plantings are done?
It's a net increase, and that's documented on those two sheets within the landscape plan.
If the community and heritage, this is from Weston.Ryan, if the community and heritage council reject the proposal to remove the trees, is there a plan B?
So Heritage have been involved in this project now for about 1.5 years. They support the project. They support a sports precinct being created on that site. What we've done is address some elements that Heritage have asked us to address. Heritage gave us an approval to conduct the works on site. Part of that process around Heritage providing that approval was having an understanding for what we might achieve in the future. So there was a fair bit of work done around what the grandstands would look like and how they would present. to satisfy Heritage Council requirements for that site. So I'm very confident that that work that's being produced will meet the requirement of Heritage Council.
Is that a no? Is the question that Ryan is, Western Ryan. I suppose what Scott's saying is that we've done enough work that we're confident we can get approval. The site is Crown land, so if it's not a sporting precinct, then it'll be a question for the Crown at some point on what they do going forward. Any other questions? We're not getting any other questions, so.
Nick, I've got a couple that I can see here. I have
Okay.
from Nick King. We have an offset plan to replace the removal of all trees.
Pardon?
Can you read that out again, please, Lee?
Sorry, from Nick King. Do we have an offset plan to replace the removal of all the trees?
The plan that's been developed to date is what's been presented. People will also be aware that we're proposing to develop an arboretum on the northern distributor site up on the hill. So I'm sure that we can document an offset plan if required, but I'm pretty comfortable with where we are with what we're proposing to replace the trees that we're removing.
So any other questions you've got, Lee, that I can't see on my particular screen for some reason?
Since this DA deals with the overall concept, is there a place where the public can see an overall budget for the complete project? Relevant, as we wouldn't be logically changing the land this much unless we were certain the project could be completed for the 25 million. Has it been confirmed as a feasible budget?
So we've developed obviously a costing for this project. That hasn't been finalised yet because the design elements of the grandstands haven't been finalised yet. But we can make that public when it's finalised.
If the selection of the designer of the overall precinct has already been decided, can you tell us the process used to appoint this designer? Were multiple candidates invited to submit an application?
So I'm not sure what that refers to. The design for the grandstands and the final design for the precinct haven't been tendered yet.
So the concept design, was that tendered?
The concept design for the landscape plan was not tendered. It was we appointed Taylor Brammer based on their experience with similar sites, and also referred that to the Heritage Council as to their comfort around who was developing that. So that's how they were appointed to develop the landscape plan.
Just with the questions, if people that want to ask questions, if they could send them to me, Nick Redmond, and then I can answer them. I think we're getting through to Lee, which is fine. Is that all that you've got there, Lee?
No, I've got a couple more, Nick. So from Mark
Keep going.
Brickington, how soon before sport can be played on the new fields?
So the multi-purpose fields in the middle will be the first fields that will become available. So if we're able to progress with the civil works, it's about a 12-week exercise to conduct those civil works. So as soon as those approvals come through, if they do, we'll conduct that work. We've then got about a six to 8 month window for growing the grass on those fields and making them playable. So they'll be the two fields that will come online first, then the athletics, and then the main stadium.
I've only got two more, Nick. I've got one from Neil Jones. Will council provide an opportunity for an on-site consultation with interested community members before the closing date?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Last one from me. Could we have an overall indication of the stages to final commissioning and use?
Pardon?
Sorry, would we have an overall indication of the stages to final commissioning and use?
I can give you the development stages. So the development stages that we're proposing obviously is the civil works, which will also include some of that piping underground preliminary work. So that creates the pads, if you like, for the development. We would at the same time be running 2 tenders for the athletic stadium and the main stadium. So part of that work will incorporate the finalising of those designs and then submissions of those DAs for approval. And then again, when those approvals, or if those approvals come through, those works would commence. So it'll be bulk earthworks. Then you'll see those 8 multi-purpose fields in the middle start to take form, then the athletics and then the main stadium. But I'd imagine that both athletics and the main stadium will be being constructed at the same time.
So this might have been one that came from Lee, but this is from Kate Hook. So just to confirm, if costs aren't finalised, we don't actually know that the project is feasible. So we could be completely changing the land without being sure the project is deliverable for 25 million.
Oh, we're pretty comfortable with our initial costings for the program and the project. Obviously, we develop our tenders within the scope of those funding that's available. So I'm pretty comfortable with the costings.
One from Neil Jones. Under COVID restrictions, how many people can attend the on-site meeting? When we've got a date, we'll sort of work out those details. But obviously, if anything we do out there, we'll have to meet the COVID restrictions. So we'll just have to comply with what we have to comply with. I don't have it in front of me about how many can attend, but we'll sort that out when we get a date for the on-site.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought it'd be any less than 20 based on the current restrictions around outdoor gatherings.
Yeah.
I've never had 20 on site when I've been out there with interested parties.
Yeah, we'll deal with that. Any other questions that you might have, Lee?
No, that exhausts mine, Nick.
I've got another one from Kate Hook. Has Crown Land been consulted as to how they would like the land to be used? Yes, they have. You might be able to go into more detail, Scott.
Not really. We've consulted with Crown Lands on that. We're the Crown Land manager for the site. Obviously, the project requires a landowner's consent, with the landowner being Crown Land. We've obtained those consents, so prima facie they're happy with what we're proposing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have provided the landowner's consent for the development.
Okay. Any other questions before we wind up? I think that's it.
Righto. Thank you.
Last calls. Thank you everyone for attending. We'll keep consulting on this as we go. There's a fair bit yet to do on this, but we'll keep you as engaged as possible as we go forward with the project. Thanks for your time.